Hi everybody, my name's Andrew and today I'm driving a Porsche Macan GTS. The Macan sits in a weird category of cars these days because, like the Alfa Romeo Giulia that I reviewed recently, it hasn't really gotten a whole lot of updates in the last decade that has been on sale. But it's so good that it hasn't really needed them. So today I'm going to take you for a quick walk around of the car, take it for a test drive, and tell you why this is probably my favorite crossover I've ever driven. The shuffling of engine offerings under this clamshell hood has probably been the biggest change to the Macan lineup, because in the last 9 years or so there have been 3 different V6s and 1 4-cylinder with multiple tune levels of each engine as well. This is a 2021 GTS, meaning that it was at the time still in the middle of the lineup, and it features a 2.9 liter twin turbo V6. Now this 2.9 liter replaced the 3 liter turbo V6 that was in my Audi S4, but also in the S and GTS prior to 2019. But it technically also replaced the turbo's 3.6 liter V6 a couple years later, because now the GTS is at the top of the lineup and there's no more turbo. So it's a little confusing, but point is, this engine in this form in 2021 made 375 horsepower and 383 foot-pounds of torque. It is of course mated to Porsche's PDK automatic, or dual clutch rather, transmission and all-wheel drive. It also sounds phenomenal. Probably one of the best exhaust notes that I've heard out of a crossover recently, aside from maybe the V8 options like the Mercedes GLC 63 or Jaguar F-Pace SVR. The exterior design of what is now the first generation Macan, thanks to the new Macan Electric coming next year, is also pretty similar to the initial 2015 launch. I mean, evolutionary updates are typically the Germans' thing, but nearly a decade without a full redesign is pushing it, even for Porsche. Although that's not a bad thing, because I think the Macan is still a pretty handsome and subtly aggressive crossover. And actually this spec is growing on me quite a bit as well. Speaking of subtlety, this is a pretty elegant spec, especially for a GTS model. Finished in night blue metallic over a Luxor beige interior, which isn't necessarily my first choice, but I think it does pair well together. This particular one lacks any of the shouty carbon fiber accessories like the side sills or big yellow carbon ceramic brakes. It just has the standard red brake calipers behind the two-tone silver and black wheels. It's also debadged at the rear almost entirely, except for the black Porsche script, which complements the clear taillights very nicely. And of course, bonus points in my book for the optional trailer hitch. Stepping inside, 2 things become immediately apparent. Firstly, the infotainment system is a huge upgrade over the earlier Macans, both in screen size and software. This is the same software that Porsche is using in all of their cars now, and it has wireless CarPlay, as you can see. But it's just so much better. I'm not going to go fully into detail of it in this video, but just trust me, it's so much better than the earlier Macan. The last one I drove was probably a 2016, if I remember correctly, and the infotainment was not that great. I will say the air vents, as a result of the bigger screen, are quite low. They're kind of weirdly positioned, so if you want to actually have air hit your face, you have to pretty much crank them all the way up, which is kind of unusual, but anyway, that's beside the point. The other thing is that, holy crap, there are so many buttons in here. This is an incredibly fully loaded Macan. I don't have the original window sticker, but I'm guessing it was over $85,000, maybe 90, just based on all the options that I can discover in here. So again, I'm not going to fully go through this right now, but you can kind of get a feel for everything here. My personal favorites are the suspension. It does have air ride, being a GTS. The sport exhaust, cooled seats or ventilated seats, either one, are very much appreciated on a day like today. Unfortunately, I can't have them on because they are quite loud on the camera, but that's beside the point. And also this drive selector here on the steering wheel. This is part of the Sport Chrono package, also with the sub-second clock up there on the dashboard. While again, I'm not the biggest fan of this color choice in here, there is no ignoring that there is a great mix of both luxury and performance options in here. As mentioned, the Sport Chrono package, which is great, sport exhaust, but then there's also things like the Premium Package Plus, which gives you the ventilated seats and a 360 camera, and there's a panoramic roof above me. And there's just so many more individual little options to mention. This particular car does also feature the driving assistance package, which I believe is somewhat uncommon on Macans from what I've seen. So it does have the full, radar cruise control and lane centering and all that. So that's great as well. And lastly, I can't forget the 18-way adaptive front sports seats. I mean, when was the last time you saw this many seat controls on, let alone a driver's seat, but also it's the exact same on the passenger side. You have, the typical forward, backward, up, down, tilt, recline, that sort of thing. But then you also have a thigh cushion extender, which is great if you're taller. And both sets of bolsters are power inflatable along with the 4-way lumbar. I have to say, in the interest of fairness, that the build quality and material choices in here would probably be similar on a base Macan that didn't cost quite so much as this one. I mean, obviously I know you can get, different types of leather, and the base ones do have like suede inserts in the seats and such. But overall, the build quality and feeling is probably fairly similar in the lesser models, not just this GTS. And at $85,000 to $90,000, that makes this car a little bit of a trickier sell. However, this one, being a 21 with 38,000 miles, is now in the mid-50s, which is actually even less than a base Macan costs brand new. So at that point, I think it becomes actually a really good deal. To once again draw an unusual comparison to the Alfa Romeo Giulia, the Macan shines even brighter when you get it out on the road, because aside from being a little bit heavy, this does really just feel like a hot hatch. It doesn't feel like a crossover. I mean, hell, at 63 inches tall, it's actually, it doesn't even require rollover warning stickers on the sun visors like SUVs typically would. In fact, it's actually just a few inches longer than a Volkswagen Golf R, which is, an actual hot hatch. And the height figure is actually closer to a Honda Civic Type R hatchback than to Porsche's own Cayenne. So, yeah, it's this is not a big car, and it drives really, really well. As you could probably hear, it also sounds really good. Unfortunately, even in Sport Plus, the PDK does auto upshift, and it does auto upshift kind of early, unfortunately. But it is still a really good transmission. Along with launch control and the stopwatch from the aforementioned Sport Chrono package, all Macan GTSs have air suspension. Now, on a twisty road, like I said just a minute ago, it is incredibly easy to forget that this is a crossover. You're sitting up a little bit higher, but the Macan does have one of the best driving positions, I think, of any small crossover that I've been in. And it is supremely well controlled and rides very well in every mode. It is, you know, a little bit on the firmer side in Sport Plus naturally, but it's really not bad, honestly. In any mode, though, this Macan, or really every variant of the Macan for that matter, has been reviewed incredibly favorably in the last 9 or 10 years since it came out. And it's really not hard to see why. This GTS is probably the sweet spot, though, in my opinion, because God, it burbles so much. Okay, to be fair, if I could make one change, or actually 2 changes. Let me make 2 changes in here. Number 1, the burbles are too consistent. They sound really cool, of course, but they do also sound very artificial because they are very consistent on pretty much every downshift. So I don't love that. And number 2, this steering wheel, I believe this is the GT Sport steering wheel as an option, since it's got the little like fake screw heads in the front of it. Even the GT Sport wheel, I like the size of it, but it is very thin. So I would have a thicker steering wheel, personally. Great paddles, though. I just got completely sidetracked with that. So anyway, in any mode, the GTS's 2.9 liter twin turbo V6 is plenty powerful. It does make more power now in the GTS because the GTS replaced the turbo, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video. But in this form, it's a little under 400 horsepower and torque, though of course you can easily throw an APR or Unitronic tune on that and bump it up even above what the GTS now makes from the factory. So that's really not an issue. On paper, the official 0 to 60 for this 2021 GTS is 4.5 seconds. And not only does that feel extremely underrated just from the driver's seat, in actual instrumented testing, this car is as much as half a second quicker than that from 0 to 60. But let's be honest, underrating figures like that is something that Volkswagen is known for. Really, the only objective negatives that I can find are the rear seat being on the smaller side for the segment, along with the cargo area in the same fashion, and the less than ideal fuel economy. Because the GTS achieves 22 miles to the gallon on the highway, or 19 combined. And while that's not entirely surprising for a near 400 horsepower performance-oriented luxury crossover, that is actually almost identical to the figures you'll get out of the Cayenne S with the same engine, which is bigger and more powerful. So I don't really understand that. But anyway, I mean, when was efficiency really a top concern for Porsche buyers anyway? Let's be honest. And when the rest of the car is this good, I keep saying car because the Macan really does feel like a car rather than a crossover. When the rest of it is this good, who really cares? I am honestly considering getting one of these as my next daily driver. So yeah, stay tuned and I guess we'll see what happens. As always, a huge thank you to Echo Park Raleigh for allowing me access not only to this Macan, but their entire inventory of high-quality, competitively priced pre-owned vehicles like this one. I'm sure you've seen a few of my previous videos here by now. But again, thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, give it a big thumbs up, or consider subscribing for plenty more content to come.